Okay, we can get ready to start in a few seconds. Okay, we're back for Ordinances Today, part 25, but Leviticus Chapter 13. Chapter 13. So let us have prayer. Dear Father in heaven, we come before you again. We thank you so much for what you have given us this morning, and we pray you continue to be with us this afternoon as we go through Leviticus and compare it with the new covenant. We give you all the praise and ask you to continue to open up our eyes and minds to be able to accept whatever you have for us. We ask this in your son's name. Amen. Okay, so Leviticus 13. It's called the law of the plague of leprosy of a person or of a man. It's really going through is, I want to look at verse 2 and start off looking at verse 2 and also looking at verse 59, I believe it is. So look what it says in verse 2. When a man shall have in the skin of his flesh a rising, a scab, or bright spot, and it be in the skin of his flesh like the plague of leprosy, then he shall be brought into Aaron the priest, or into one of his sons the priest. Now look at verse 59. This is the law of the plague of leprosy. In a garment of woolen or linen, either in the warp or woof, or anything of skin, to pronounce it clean or to pronounce it unclean. Now we go back to the beginning there, chapter 13. And you see what it says there in 13 verse 3. And the priest shall look on the plague in the skin of the flesh. And when the hair in the plague is turned white and the plague is sight, be deeper than the skin of the flesh, it is a plague of leprosy. And the priest shall look on him and pronounce him unclean. So, of course, in this particular, what we are calling the law of leprosy, the priest plays a major role. So, he's the one that's announcing that the man is unclean, as well as observing that the unclean man, he's determining whether he's really unclean, if that's leprosy, or he's not leprosy. In either case, we find numerous circumstances whereby the priest must determine the status of the unclean man. The priest is the one that determines the status of the unclean man. Like, for example, we got a bunch of them here, but let's just look like verse 5. And the priest shall look on him the seventh day, and behold, if Well, let's look at 4. If the bright spot be white in the skin of his flesh, and in the sight be not deeper than the skin, and the hair thereof be not turned white, then the priest shall shut up him that have the plague 7 days. So he should be isolated for 7 days. But then verse 5. And the priest, back to the priest, shall look on him the 7th day, and behold, if the plague is in his sight, be at a stay, and the plague spread not in the skin, then the priest shall set him up 7 days more. Okay, look at verse 8. And if the priest see that, behold, the scab spreadeth in the skin, then the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is leprosy. Of course, you had to read this whole chapter. We already been to this. We read this whole chapter already before when we were going through each chapter. I'm just picking and choosing some things here. The point I'm bringing out now is how the important role that the priest is playing here dealing with this law of leprosy. So when you go to verse 10 and 11, and the priest shall see him, and behold, if the rising be white in the skin, and if it turn to hair white, and there be quick raw flesh in the rising, it is an old leprosy in the skin of his flesh, and the priest shall pronounce him unclean, and shall not shut him up, for he is, and shall not shut him up, for he is unclean. Okay, so you go to, let's see, verse 12 and 13. And if the leprosy break out abroad in the skin, and the leprosy cover all the skin of him that had the plague for his head, even to his foot, whithersoever the priest looketh, then the priest, in verse 12, shall consider, and behold, if the leprosy have covered all his skin, or his flesh, he shall pronounce him clean that have the plague. It is all turned white, he is clean. But when it is raw flesh appeareth in him, he shall be unclean. Then jump down to, let's see, look at verse 18. The flesh also, in which even in the skin there was a boil, and is healed, and in the place of the boil there is a white rising, or a bright spot, white and somewhat reddish, and it be showed to the priest. 20. And if when the priest seeth it, behold, it be in sight lower than the skin, and the hair thereof be turned white, the priest shall pronounce them unclean. It is the plague of leprosy broken out of the boil. Then you jump down, let's say jump down to 24 and 25. Or if there be any flesh in the skin whereof there is a hot burning, and the quick flash that burneth have a white spot, somewhat reddish or white, then in verse 25, then the priest shall look upon it, and behold, if the hair in the bright spot be turned white, and it be in sight deeper than the skin, it is leprosy, broken out of the burning. Wherefore, if the priest shall pronounce him unclean, it is the plague of leprosy. Look at 26 through 28. But if the priest look on it, and behold, there is no white hairs in the bright spot, and it be no lower than the other skin, but he's somewhat dark, then the priest shall shut him up 7 days, and the priest shall look upon him the 7th day, and if it be spread much abroad in the skin, then the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is the plague of leprosy. 28. And if the bright spot be stayed in place, and spread not in the skin, but it be somewhat dark, it is a rising and a burning, and the priest shall pronounce him clean, for it's an inflammation of the burning. Now let's jump over to this more other ones example, but let's just go over to 38 to 39. If, there's a lot of ifs because he's giving us ideas of different scenarios dealing with this unclean, clean, dealing with leprosy. 38 and 39. If a man also or a woman have in the skin of their flesh bright spots, even white bright spots. Here we go, 39. Then the priest shall look, and behold, if the bright spots in the skin of their flesh be darkish white, is a freckle spot that grow up in the skin, he is clean. Then 40 to 44. And the man whom hair is fallen off his head, he is bald, yet is he clean. And he that have his hair fallen off from the part of his head toward his face, he is forehead bald, yet is he clean. And if there be in the bald head or bald forehead a white reddish sore, it is leprosy sprung up in his bald head or his bald forehead. Then the priest shall look upon it, and behold, if the rising of the sore be white, reddish in his bald head or in his bald forehead, as the leprosy appeareth in the skin of the flesh, he is a leprous man. He is unclean. The priest shall pronounce him utterly unclean. His plague is in his head, and the leper in whom the plague is, his clothes shall be rent, and his head bare, and he shall put on a covering upon his upper lip, and shall cry, unclean, unclean. All the days, let's read 46 as well, and 40, I read 45, 46. All the days wherein the plague shall be in him, he shall be defiled. He is unclean. He shall dwell alone without the camp or outside the camp shall his habitation be. Then you have the cleansing of the leopard, the same leopard, the cleansing of his garment. Once the leopard is whom the plague is, his clothes shall be rent, and his head bare, and he shall put on a covering upon his upper lip, above his head, upper lip, and cry, unclean, unclean, which we said in 45. Every day the leopard has the plague of leprosy, he shall be defiled, as we mentioned. He is unclean and shall dwell alone without the camp, shall his habitation be, verse 46. Verse 47 to 59 covers the garment of the leopard when the man has leprosy and how the priest should handle it. I didn't go through all that, but 47 and 59 tells us how the leopard clothing, his garment, should be handled. So that is just an idea. That's a recap, basically, of this law of leprosy. It doesn't say anything about how he's going to be cleansed, how he's cleansed, or anything he's supposed to do afterwards. It doesn't come in this chapter. It comes in the next chapter. This chapter specifically talks about the law of leprosy, just the leprosy as a whole, how leprosy is determined, and what's to happen with the clothing of the leopard, how long the leopard is supposed to stay away from everybody, how long he's supposed to be isolated, how the priest is to go back and forth until this man is unclean before he can come back into the congregation. But the key factor there in 13 said everything's quite a bit dealing with the priest. Priest plays a major role here. So the first question really was what this ordinance is. So we went through this ordinance. The second is, did this ordinance exist before sin entered the world? No. Say no, it didn't exist. Obviously it didn't exist. There was no diseases and none of that kind of stuff for sin. So that's quite obvious. So 3, how does the word forever apply to ordinance? In other words, is that word forever is anywhere in the old covenant or new covenant for that matter, where it applies to this ordinance of leprosy? It's one time, and I didn't put down here the verse, where it's at. The only time leprosy is mentioned as forever, I'll find it for you, is when the servant of Elisha, the man of Yah, let me find it for you. Let me go to that. One time is it mentioned. Well, I put it this way, one time that I only found, or saw, I should say. Okay, go to 2 Kings. 2 Kings chapter 4. And I'm going to read this right here so you can get a little context of all this. It's about 8 verses. But Gehazi, the servant of Elisha, the man of Yah, said, Behold, my master have spared Naaman the Syrian. Verse 20 in chapter 5. 20 through verse 20 to 27. Chapter 5. 2 Kings chapter 5. But Gehazi, the servant of Elisha, the man of Yah, said, Behold, my master have spared Naaman this Syrian, and not receiving at his hand that which he bought. But as Yahuwah liveth, I will run after him and take somewhat of him. 21 says, So Gehazi followed after Naaman. And when Naaman saw him running after him, he lighted down from the chariot to meet him and said, Is all well? Now, backtrack a little bit before then. You remember Naaman is cured of the leprosy by Elisha. He told me he had to dip down into the Jordan 7 times. And in the 7th time, he came up clean. So that just to give you that from verse 1 all the way through 19. So we were picking up after that. That's where we at. So in verse 22, and he said, All is well, my master have sent me. This is Gehazi telling Naaman, he said, My master have sent me, saying, Behold, even now there is come to me from Mount Ephraim 2 young men of the sons of prophets, giving them, I pray thee, a talent of silver and 2 changes of garment. See, Elisha didn't take anything for healing him because it's of Yah. He didn't take anything from him. Yah healed Naaman. But the servant of Elisha went after him because he had evil thoughts. You'll see as we go along here. Verse 23, and Naaman said, Be content. Because remember the previous verse said, a talent, 1 talent of silver, and 2 changes of garment. But then Naaman said, Be content. Take 2 talents. And he urged him and bound 2 talents of silver in 2 bags, and with 2 changes of garment, and laid them upon 2 of his servants, and they bare them before him. And when he came to the tower, he took them from their hand and bestowed them in the house, and let the men go, and they departed. Okay, continuing on. Verse 25. But he went in and stood before his master. And Elisha said unto him, Whence comest thou? Where are you coming from? Gehazi. And he said, Thy servant went no whither. No whither. Other words, he lied. He went no whither. I ain't going nowhere. Verse 26, and he said unto him, Went not my heart with thee? When the man turned again from his chariot to meet thee, is it a time to receive money and to receive garments and olive yards and vineyards and sheep and oxen and men servants and maid servants? 27, the leprosy therefore of Naaman shall cleave unto you. Obviously, it sounds like Yahuwah revealed it to him. In this verse, and leprosy therefore of Naaman shall cleave unto thee and unto thy seed forever. And he went out from his presence a leopard as white as snow. As white as snow. You see that in verse 27. The leprosy therefore of Naaman shall cleave unto thee and unto thy seed forever. And he went out from his presence a leopard as white as snow. That's the only place that I've seen anything dealing with forever, dealing with this particular ordinance of the law of leprosy. And it was an example dealing with Elisha and Naaman and Gehazi. So that's the only place that it appears at. Number 4.
Hey, Brother Birch.
Yes, sir.
I don't know, do you got Matthew chapter 8 in your notes?
Matthew chapter 8. Yes, I do.
Okay.
I got
So I'm trying to see what.
I got
Yeah.
Matthew chapter 8 verses 1 to 4. Is that what you got?
1 through 7. I just got
Oh,
one
you
for
went to
7.
7. Yeah, I didn't go all the way
Yeah.
to 7. Yeah,
Yeah.
I got
I
that.
was trying to see what he. I was trying to see what were he relating to when he told him to go to the priest.
Yeah, well, it's getting ready. I'm getting ready to actually cover that part in whether this ordinance was carried over to the new covenant, basically.
Okay.
I don't know if it's going to cover what you're talking about, though, but I'm gonna see. We'll see. But yes, I do have that. Actually, I have Mark 1:40 to 44 and also Luke 5:12 to 16 as well. So the fourth question is, can we find the ordinance carried over into the new covenant? And the answer is yes. There was a case of leprosy in the new covenant, for example, which Yahushua informed the leper to follow the things that Moses commanded. So go to Matthew chapter 8. We had a similar conversation the other day about this, is whether or not Yahushua was observing more so or less the ordinances of old. And we found out that he was obedient unto death, which means that he was doing what he had to do as an example. Because remember, I didn't mention this earlier this morning, but I mentioned it the other day. Remember, this is still part of the 70-week prophecy. This is still part of the 70-week prophecy. And Yah still, at his death, up until his death, 3.5 years after that would have been the end of the 70-year prophecy. The end of the 70-year prophecy, in essence, ended at the stoning of Stephen, but it really ended there in Acts 13:46 that we talk about, when he took it away from the Jews and gave it to the Gentiles. That's when they stopped being the chosen people as the one going out and spreading. Now it's for all of us, because now we all been grafted in. So I didn't mention that earlier this morning, but I've mentioned it many other times. So yes, he gave them the ordinance. This ordinance that we read there in 13, that ordinance of leprosy came from Yahuwah. That's what that's in the law of Moses, not in the law of Yahuwah. You know, we look at the 10 Commandments. It's not directly there in the 10 Commandments. It's in the law of Moses. Remember the ones that Moses wrote down? But Yah gave that to him. Yah gave that to him to write down. So in essence, it's still Yah's. It's still his ordinances. Moses he just wrote it down. It's not his ordinances. It's Yah's. So when we read chapter 8, verse 1 to 4, look what it says. When he was come down from the mountain, great multitudes followed him. And behold, there came a leper and worshiped him, saying, Master, if thou wilt, thou can make me clean. Now he's saying this to Yahushua. Think about this for a second. He said, you can make me clean. He didn't say anything about the law of the leprosy. I'm talking about the man now. He's talking about Yahushua. He went to Yahushua. If you will, you can make me whole again. You can heal me if you want to. You can make me clean. But look at verse 3. And Yahushua put forth his hand and touched him, saying, I will be thou clean. And immediately, what happened? The leprosy was cleansed. He cleansed the leprosy. Now, this is what I want to think about for a second. During the old covenant, when they were declared, the priests declared that they had leprosy. When the leprosy left them, who was the one that removed the leprosy? How did they get better? They weren't putting medicine in that. How did they get better? Yah, Yahushua. He was the one who healed them, got them better. Whatever period of time they had to stay while they had that. See, leprosy was always considered at the time being because of sin. But that leprosy that they had at the time, when they got healed, that was Yahushua. So it makes sense when we come all the way to the new covenant, he cleansed them first. He was cleansed. The same one that cleansed them in the old covenant that you don't hear about is the same one now that actually literally we hear through the scripture cleansed them. You guys follow me? Okay. But we got to continue on though. And Yahushua said unto him, see thou tell no man, but go thy way and show thyself to the priest and offer the gift that Moses commanded for a testimony unto them. Moses said, go and offer the gift that Moses. So now we're talking about the law of Moses. Yahushua was still following the law of Moses. But he was the one who we can see now in the scriptures is the physical one that actually cleansed them. Instead of the old covenant, when the guy was isolated away for 7 days, 14 days, however many days it was, when he got better, it was Yahuwah that was cleansing him. That's why we got to think about all of this. So now, that's why he told them, you got to go to the priest. Go to the priest and offer your gift. Go to the priest and offer your gift. So that little scenario right there, the only thing different, Yahuwah, same person that cleansed them in the new covenant, the same one that cleansed them in the old covenant. You just don't hear that way. Here, how you think he got clean? Yahuwah. That's how he got clean. Just like here. Yah spoke it out and cleansed them. But the same thing occurred in the old covenant. It was Yahuwah that got him. When we get sick, who you think healed? How you think we get better? We can always say, well, it's the medicine we take it, or it's this, or it's that. Oh, really? That's what's getting you better, huh? That's what's getting you better. Yahuwah is the one who's getting us better. You don't have to take a drop of anything that Yahuwah can say, get well, and you'll feel better. So I just think there was a good comparison that we're still talking about Yah. We still talk about the same one that healed him in the new covenant is the same one that healed him in the old covenant. Just you hear about it. You just hear him. You just hear that he cleansed them. That's all. That's the only thing different. He cleansed them in the old covenant. Cleansed them here. When you go over to Mark, you'll see over in Mark chapter 1, (40 to 44). You pretty much find a similar thing there. It's similar. It's similar there. 40 to 44. And I was thinking to myself, and I just thought about it right now even more. I'm going to look at, it's also in Luke 5:12 to 16 as well. You find similar things in Luke 5:12 to 16. But I'm sitting here just talking about this with you all, and I'm thinking to myself here, this one part where it says in verse 14. Well, let's look at Mark, the Mark version. Mark 1:40 to 44. But look at verse, let me just read like 42. And as soon as he had spoken, immediately the leprosy departed from him, and he was cleansed. But then it says, and he straightway charged them, and forthwith sent him away. In 44, and said unto him, see thou say nothing to any man, but go thy way, show thyself to the priest, and offer for thy cleansing those things which Moses commanded for a testimony unto them. I asked myself, why would he, the scriptures always have these little nuggets in there, it seems like, but it has it in there. So now why would he tell them to go and straightway not say anything to anybody? Maybe because when you go back to the old covenant, where was the guy that had the leprosy at? He was isolated. He wasn't around anybody, right? Because he couldn't be, because it was contagious. He wasn't around anybody. The only one that he dealt with was who? The priest. So in essence, he was not to be interacting with anybody going to the priest. Because in the old days, you would have been isolated, and then you was dealing with Yahushua himself. So now you just need to make sure you just go to the priest. Don't stop and chit chat. Don't stop and have a social. Go straight to the priest. Why? Because the process is still not finished yet. You got to offer the gift. You got to go and fulfill what the law of Moses says to do to complete this whole purification. We ain't even got to the purification because that's not until the next chapter. But you all see what I'm saying? They were not, as they had leprosy, they were outside of the camp. They were not to be intermingling with anybody. The priest is the one who pronounced them being clean. Now they can go forth.
Brother Birch,
Yes.
That's the reason why also, I think he told the cripple, don't say anything, don't tell anybody.
Yeah,
Was it
yeah.
the cripple or the blind? The cripple?
Yes, yes. And it just, and be honest with you, it's just not until now, actually now, I done read through this purification process in 14, through the leprosy in 13, all these chapters here dealing with the leper, and it's not until now that I realize why he said that. At least that's one reason I know he said it.
Y'all thought the other reason why he said it, because his time wasn't ready yet. Because I know when he told the the demon to shut his mouth, because he was saying who he was.
Mm-hmm.
And I know his appointed time to die wasn't ready.
Yeah. Yes. 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 Well, this one here was way before that time. Because this here in Luke, well, actually, in Matthew 8, there still was a little bit of time left before it was time for him to go to the cross. But still, yeah, I hear what you're saying. So this leprosy thing did carry over into the new covenant. But the question I have for you next is number 5. Did Yahushua remove this ordinance at the executing stake or at the cross? Did he remove it?
I would think so.
What you say, Rick?
I would think so because
You say you don't think so?
I do. I would say I would think so because
Yes,
he's the high
yes.
priest now.
Yes.
So any sickness, we already go to him for healing.
Right. Right.
We gotta go no priest in it.
Right. So yes, the purification process of the leper, which we're going to talk about in the next chapter, it still applies here because we're talking about leprosy. It's found especially in verses 1 to 7 in chapter 14. But we ain't going to talk about it now. We're going to get to it 14 pretty soon here. And it applies to this because chapter 14 and chapter 13 are all dealing with the leprosy. 1 is the law of leprosy, 13, and 14 is the purification process of the leper. So they're both dealing with the leper. And one thing we know, another reason why, everybody, the reason why, and again, we don't see it here in 13, but we'll see it in 14. And that is animal sacrifices were required. And we'll see that when we get over there. It was required. Thus, as mentioned on numerous occasions, Yahushua removed such requirements because he is the purifier. Go to Titus chapter 2, verse 14. Somebody read that for me. I got 3 of them here. Titus chapter 2, verse 14. Titus chapter 2, verse 14. Somebody get Hebrews 9:23. And somebody get James 4:8.
I got Titus 2:14.
Okay.
Who gave himself for us, that he might redeem us from all iniquities, and purify unto himself a peculiar people, zealous of good works.
Right, okay. Somebody read to me Hebrews 9:23.
(9:23). It was therefore necessary that the patterns of things in the heavens should be purified with these, but the heavenly things themselves with better sacrifices than these.
So it was necessary there. It was therefore necessary that the pattern of things in heaven, the holy place, the most holy place, the candlesticks, the ark, the table of showbread, all these different things that was representative of heaven. It says the pattern of these things in the heaven should be purified with these, with the earthly things, be purified with these. But the heavenly things themselves were a better sacrifice than those. So the earthly sacrifice that had the earthly high priest is not better than the heavenly sanctuary with the everlasting high priest. Somebody go with me to James 4:8. James 4:8.
Draw nigh to Yah, and he will draw nigh to you. Cleanse your hands, ye sinners, and purify your hearts, ye double-minded.
Yahushua is the one that purifies us. He's the one that cleanses us.
It's morning at 24.
This right here, the heavenly sanctuary that you see here in heaven. Remember he went back and he sat down on the right hand of Yah? So how could he sit on the right hand of Yah? Because it's at the table of showbread. It was symbolic of the table of showbread, right? Left hand, right hand, 2 stacks of bread. See? Candlesticks over here. The altar of sweet incense in the middle, in the holy place. You go past the veil, and there was the Ark of the Covenant that the 10 Commandments was in, and that the ordinances were leaning up against it, the Ark of the Covenant. So, there was no process of animal sacrifices. Now, at the cross. Once the cross, there's no more of that. So did the apostles keep or mention anything in favor of maintaining this ordinance of this ordinance of the law of leprosy? I haven't seen anything in there that tells me otherwise. We don't have an earthly priest, we have a heavenly priest. We don't sacrifice animals, we already had a sacrifice. So therefore, if I wouldn't expect the apostles to validate or say this is still in effect, they understood. Those verses we're reading is from them, that we're reading in James and Hebrews and all these verses. It's coming from them, the apostles. They understood. When Paul was talking about circumcision of the heart, he understood. You ain't saved by getting out there getting circumcised, physically getting circumcised. That doesn't save you. Let's say, let me say this. Does a woman get circumcised? So a woman don't get circumcised, right? That'd been kind of unfair then, wouldn't it? If the men were the only one getting circumcised and they guaranteed to go, they're saved through circumcision, but the woman can't. Huh? Think about that. Circumcision doesn't save anyone. It doesn't save anybody. Chapter 14. Chapter 14. If you go over to Leviticus, chapter 14 now. We just got through talking about the law of leprosy itself. Now let's go to chapter 14, because now we're going to start talking about the purification process of the same individual that have leprosy. So the purification of a leper. Let's look at verse 2. Well, I'll look at verse 1 first. Yahuwah spake unto Moses, saying, okay, so we notice who it's coming from. Verse 2. This shall be the law of the leper in the day of his cleansing. He shall be brought unto the priest. Here we go again. Brought unto the priest. And the priest shall go forth out of the camp, and the priest shall look, and behold, if the plague of the leprosy be healed in the leper, is healed. Then shall the priest command to take for him that is to be cleansed 2 birds alive, and clean and cedar wood and scarlet and hyssop, and the priest shall command that one of the birds be killed in an earthen vessel over running water. Verse 6, as for the living bird, he shall take it and the cedar wood and the scarlet and the hyssop, and shall dip them and the living bird in the blood of the bird that was killed over the running water. 7, and he shall sprinkle upon him that is to be cleansed from the leprosy 7 times. So you can kind of understand why he told Naaman to dip down 7 times. And shall pronounce him clean, and shall let the living bird loose unto the open field. Then verse 8, and he that is to be cleansed shall wash his clothes, and shave off all his hair, and wash himself in the water, that he may be clean. And after that he shall come into the camp, and shall tear abroad out of his tent 7 days. The previous process happened on the 7th day. Then on the 8th day he shall take 2 he lambs. See, we ain't finished. Then on the 8th day, go over to verse 10. We'll look at 9 through 11. But it shall be on the 7th day that he shall shave all his hair off his head and his beard and his eyebrows, even all his hair he shall shave off, and he shall wash his clothes. Also he shall wash his flesh in water, and he shall be clean. But we ain't finished yet, because in verse 10 it says, and on the 8th day shall take 2 he lambs without blemish, and 1 ewe lamb of the first year without blemish, and 3/10 deals of fine flour for a meat offering, mingled with oil, and 1 log of oil. In verse 11, and the priest shall make him clean, shall present the man that is to be made clean in those things before Yahuwah at the door of the tabernacle of the congregation. 12, and the priest shall take one of the lambs and offer him for a trespass offering, and the log of oil, and wave them for a wave offering before Yahuwah. Verse 13, and he shall slay the lamb in the place where he shall kill the sin offering and the burnt offering in the holy place, For as the sin offering is the priest, so is the trespass offering, if you all recall, because it is most holy. And there's more details of this purification, starting there with verse 14, all the way to verse 31. There's more details about it, including if a poor person has it as well. If a poor person gets leprosy, that's even included in here as well, in those verses. They had to do sin offering to make an atonement, burnt offering, meat offering, trespass offering, and be waived if the leper is even poor. So the same thing applied to a poor person as well, whether they had leprosy and whether someone else that wasn't poor had leprosy. They went through the same process. These are the law of him in whom is the plague of leprosy, whom hand is not able to get that which pertaineth to his cleansing. So verse 32, it tells you this is the law of him in whom is the plague of leprosy. So we just got through talking about that. But also, when you look at 34 and 35, but look who's saying it in 33 again. And you who are spake unto Moses and unto Aaron, saying, he's speaking to them. When ye be come into the land of Canaan, which I give to you for possession, I will put the plague of leprosy in a house of the land of your possession. And he that owneth the house shall come and tell the priest, saying, it seemeth to me there is as it were a plague in the house. And then when you look at verses 37 to 53, we won't read all that, but he gives you all the details. And inclusive in there is a couple of birds.
Not right now.
Was that?
No.
There's a couple birds around verse 49. It talks about the birds. So we got a purification process of the man with the two birds, and he had to cleanse himself of water. Then we got the process he basically did doing it in front of the congregation, in front of the Yahuwah, I should say, with the sin offering, the burnt offering, the trespass offering, the wave offering. All these offerings is still requirement with the priest. They still had to have a priest to do all this. That's an earthly priest. We already read multiple verses where we have a high priest now, a great high priest that touched with the feelings of our infirmities. We have one. If I get a disease, and there are cases of leprosy worldwide still, but I ain't going to no priest. I'm going to a priest, all right, but I'm going to the high priest. The one we can't touch, but the one we can't physically touch, but in our hearts we feel it. That's the one I'm going to. So this leprosy, chapter 13, which just talked about the law of leprosy, chapter 14, the purification of leprosy, either chapter doesn't matter. One is the law of it, the other one talks about the purification of it. The fact is that leprosy requires animal sacrifices, and it requires an earthly priest here. It required that. So, did this ordinance exist before sin entered the world? I would say no. Again, how does the word forever apply to this ordinance? We just read it, dealing with Elisha. We just read that in there by Gehazi. Lying and taking money because Elisha didn't take any money. See, the Yah, he was a prophet. He was the one who wanted the double portion. He actually just wanted the same what Elijah had. He said, get a double portion. If you see me going up in the chariot. He saw him going up, he got a double portion. He's the same one who was thrown over into a graveyard, or thrown into a pit, grave pit, and while he was in there, his bones were in there, and they took a man while they were running, and I can't remember if it was the Amorites or whoever they were running from, threw the man over, and then the man touched the bones of Elisha and came to life. That's the Elisha we're talking about. Yah blessed him. It's powerful. Can we find the ordinance carried over into the new covenant? Yes, we just talked about that earlier. The examples we gave, where Yahushua told him to go and give your gift to the priest. You have to make this offering. You have to do all this purification process. You got to do all this. He referenced him back to Moses' law. Isn't that funny? He referenced him back to Moses' law, the law that he gave Moses. And the Lord spoke unto Moses, and then go back to Moses. The Lord's the one who gave it to him. So he's telling him to go back to something he gave. How you like that? So he was obedient to his own law. But then when he died, there's no longer a need for this anymore, because he is the priest. He is the offering. He is the high priest. That's the one we go to. Well, so if I told you all, I asked you all had to go to a priest, an earthly priest, who are you going to? Where are you going to go? Who's going to be the priest you're going to go to? If I say, if you say this ordinance still exists today, and we know that in order to exist today, the whole entire effort was dealing with a priest. First question I ask you, what priest you going to? So Lisa, where you going? Who are you going to find? What priest you going to go to? That's going, because you got to remember now, if you go to a priest, they're going to have to conduct the purification process. You can't be just making up stuff. They got to follow it based on what Scripture says. This whole thing about the two birds, one to be killed, one clean, one purify you by pouring water over it, and all this kind of, you got to do all that stuff to be purified. So you got to find a priest that follows this. So who are you going to get? Who you going to get, Jackie? Anybody online, who you going to get? Who's going to be your priest?
There ain't no one down here. You have to be Yahushua.
Has to be Yahushua. So then if it has to be Yahushua, that means we can't offer sacrifices anyway, because we got to have that in order to complete the purification process. So I would say it didn't carry over. It didn't carry over from the standpoint at his death, because he was obedient unto death. That's why he told him to go to Moses. So they could never come to him and say, you didn't follow the law of Moses. Well, you may not know this because you don't believe that I'm who I am, but you know, I'm the one who gave it to him. I'm the one who gave it to him. So, okay, follow what I gave to him. I'm the one who told Isaiah that I was going to be a child born and become a wonderful counselor, mighty Yah, everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. I'm the one who told Isaiah to write that in there. He wrote, remember the scriptures tell us that Moses wrote about what? About him. Remember the scriptures tell us that? The volume of the book is about him. Isn't the volume of the book about him? Moses wrote about him. All these times we read all these chapters, it keeps saying, and Yah said this to Moses, and Yah said this to Aaron and Moses, and Yah said that to Moses and Aaron. I would say that we don't have to worry about that one anymore. So, did Yahushua remove the ordinance at the executing state? Well, obviously, yes. We already been through this portion of it. And Leviticus, when we look at chapter 14, Leviticus 1 through 7, you see that process of the animals. And then there's other sacrifices of animals as you go further into 14 with these birds, more birds, sin offering, burnt offering, trespass offering. Those are all animal sacrifices. They even had meat offering in there too. That was the one without animals. Did the apostles keep or mention anything in favor of maintaining the ordinances? I would say no. I didn't see anything about that, after Yahushua's death. That leads us to chapter 15. Chapter 15. This chapter is the running issue, running discharge from the body. Now, when you pull up that word running issue, it's H2100. It says specifically to have a sexual flux, to flow, to gush, to issue, to discharge from the flesh. Because of his issue, he is unclean. So whatever that issue is, whatever that fluid or whatever it is coming out of his body, that's not leprosy, but it's just some specific type of unclean discharge. So you know what that tells me? That tells me that before sin, it was nothing like this. You think there was anything like this? Now, I don't know how Yah dealt with the woman when it came to pregnancy. I would think that that was a punishment to her, right? To have all that pain and all that stuff. But maybe they didn't have it before then, before sin. So it's kind of implied, right?
Isn't childbirth, it is a punishment after sin.
No, I'm talking about before sin.
Right.
Remember, there was children that was born before sin, too. Remember, if you go to one of the verses they use, this is where we talk about how life was going on. See, many people think that after he created the earth in 6 days, and he rested the 7th day, then day 8, sin came in the world. That's not the way it worked. There was if you go to Genesis chapter 2, and I don't know, this verse hit me one day. Genesis chapter 2, verse 4, and also 5, but verse 4 in particular, it says, "These are the generations of the heavens and of the earth when they were created in the day that Yahuwah Yah made the earth and the heavens." In every, verse 5, in every plant of the field before it was in the earth, and every herb of the field before it grew. For the Lord Yah has not caused it to rain upon the earth, and there was not a man to till the ground. Well, that word in there dealing with generations, these are the generations of the heavens and the earth when they were created in that day that Yahuwah God made the heaven and the earth. So there was generations. There were people. It was more than just Adam, well, I'm going to say Adam, the man and the woman. They didn't become Adam and Eve until they sinned in chapter 3. But not only that, there's other verses. And when you go to chapter 1, and you start there with verse 27, it says, "And Yah created man in his own image. In the image of Yah created he him, male and female created he them. And Yah blessed them, and Yah said to them, Be fruitful and multiply, and replenish the earth, and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over every living creature, over every living thing that moveth upon the earth." So it is obvious to me, because sin hadn't came in the world, he told them to multiply and replenish the earth. There was going to be more humans during that time of no sin, which we, through studying, came to the conclusion that was 33 and a half years, basically. So.
Hey, Brother Birch.
Yes, sir.
Back to verse 2, Leviticus 15, verse 2. That's probably something similar to like a UTI, probably for men.
Oh, like a UTI?
Yeah. Where you read coordinates.
It could be, yeah. Yeah, that's the part I think is referring to with the sexual flux.
Yeah.
But yes. But evidently there's other ones too. There's other discharges, other types of discharges of bodily fluid. Do we know any? What's some other type of infections?
Are we talking about STD, all that stuff?
Yeah, maybe they probably didn't call it that then. Don't tell what they call it back
this
then.
and that.
Yeah, there's other running issues of stuff. You know, that sounds terrible. Running issues. So the process to clean the issue is found in verses 3 to 33. Whether male or female has this issue, it doesn't matter. In verse 32 to 33, it says, "This is the law of him that have an issue of him whom seed goeth from him and is defiled therewith," in 33, "and of her that is sick of her flowers, and of him that have an issue of the man and of the woman, and of him that lieth of her that is unclean." I mean, it really doesn't matter, because in both cases in here, when you read in chapter 15, you'll see that they required animal sacrifices to cleanse, to purify. They required animal sacrifices. Still, even with this, they still required animal sacrifice. See if I can find it somewhere here. Well, yeah, you can look at verse 13, starting with verse 13. I mean, you read the whole chapter. It's only 33 verses. Chapter 13. "And when he that have an issue is cleansed of his issue, then he shall number to himself 7 days for his cleansing, and wash his clothes, just like with the leopard. Bathe his flesh in running water, and he shall be clean, just like the leopard. And when he that have an issue is clean of his issue, then he shall number to himself," I just read that, 7 days, I just read that, 7 days for his cleansing, and wash his clothes, and bathe his flesh in running water, and shall be clean. 14, "And on the 8th day he should take to him 2 turtle doves, 2 young pigeons, and come before Yahuwah into the door of the tabernacle of the congregation, and give them unto the priest," back to the priest. 15, "And the priest shall offer them, the one for a sin offering, and the other for a burnt offering. And the priest shall make an atonement for him before Yahuwah for his issue. And if any man's seed of copulation go out of him, then he shall wash all of his flesh in water, and be unclean until the evening. And every garment and every skin whereon is the seed of copulation shall be washed with water, and be unclean until the evening." I got something noted here with that copulation. I just want to make sure I have the correct thing here. Yeah, to be lying down, this is what I got. To be lying down sexually or carnally with someone, a woman, in this case, a woman probably. Anybody in that case, probably. With a woman, though, in particular. So that's what it is. It's the act of lying down someone carnally. So again, it's requiring these offerings for this running issue, just like with the leprosy. I didn't see any meat offering, anything offered in here, but it's irrelevant, because you got all the other offerings, all these offerings. burnt offering, still got the burnt offering, still got the sin offering. And I don't remember seeing the trespass offering either, like we did over in the purification process for the leper. But in either case, there are animal sacrifices. We do see the 2 turtle doves. The 2 turtle doves and the 2 young pigeons, that's found in the purification process of the leper. So all these things we see, and that's really what that ordinance was without going through the whole 33 verses. So did the ordinance exist before sin came into the world? So I would say no. How does the word forever apply to this ordinance? I never saw anything in the scriptures pertaining to forever dealing with this specific ordinance, unless you all have found something. If you have, let me know where it's at, because I haven't found anything. Where it said anything about this ordinance being forever. Number 4, can we find this ordinance carried over into the new covenant? I have not found that covered into the new covenant except the one with the woman had the issue of blood. Wasn't that for 12 years? She had an issue of blood for 12 years that he healed. So that's the only case that I can recall. Unless you guys got something else, that's why he was alive. And he did the same thing he did with the leper. He cleansed her from that. Now, I don't remember in there, and maybe you guys can refresh my memory, I don't remember him in there telling her to go to the priest or anything. I don't remember that being said. But I do remember she had an issue of blood, I believe it was. So that's the only example I see in there. And I would have to say that applies the same way as the rest of these do, as far as having to go to some priest if you got an issue of blood. Because in order to do the purification process, you got to go through the animal sacrificial process. And none of us have these animals. None of us have any priest we can go to as an earthly priest anyway. That's been proven by Yahushua, who is our high priest now. There's no longer a high priest, an earthly high priest. Now it's all Yahushua. So I thank God for that. So have this ordinance, did Yahushua remove this ordinance at the executing stake or the cross? I would say yes. Did the apostles keep or mention anything in favor of maintaining this ordinance? I would say no. I didn't see anything yet. If you guys see something, let me know. So again, chapter 11 that we covered this morning is carried over into the new covenant, which is carried over to us now. Yes, he did not destroy it. What did we cover in chapter 12? Chapter 12, purification of woman in childbirth. That was not carried over. Well, we got an example. It was carried over in the new covenant, but it didn't continue after his death, because that one also required animal sacrifice. Chapter 13, we just finished, in chapter 14, chapter 13, chapter 13 covered the laws of leprosy, and chapter 14, the purification of leprosy, and in both cases dealing with animal sacrifices, we no longer have to worry about that. And then chapter 15, of course, is this issue of blood. We don't have to worry about that as either, because that required an animal sacrifice as well. So like I mentioned to you, when we finish this series, when the series gets finished, at the very end, plan on having a spreadsheet at the end where you can see each one of them, whether they're whether to continue them now or not to continue them. So it'd be easy to follow it. You just point to one chapter. And I believe that going through these 27 chapters, we'll be able to decipher whether the other ordinances that's in other books, whether those ordinances still exist today. I've given an example before, like the red heifer. That's an offering. There's no need of no offerings anymore. So right off the bat, I would say that's not even required. It's not required anymore. We just talked about circumcision. That's two right there. That's not necessarily the beginning of them in Leviticus. One is in Numbers, one is in Genesis. But there's a few other ones. And when you all started reading and going through those, you can always go back to what we talked about here to use that as representation to get a better idea of whether or not now with these questions, what is the ordinance? What is the ordinance? Did the ordinance exist before sin? Did it apply to forever, whether in the old or new covenant? Can this ordinance be found over in the new covenant? Did Yahushua remove it at the executing stake or the cross? And did the apostles mention anything about in favor of maintaining it? That's 6 questions you can ask to help yourself to determine whether this ordinance is still something to keep today. So what I say to you in closing is this, back to Colossians 2:14, blotting out the handwritings of ordinances that's against us. Something that's good for us can't be against us. Therefore, we can't just take all the ordinances and lump all the 27 chapters of Leviticus into that ordinances. We can't just take that whole thing and lump it in there and say, okay, all the ordinances is done away with. So then, those people that say that are some of the same ones that will be saying, we got to make sure we eat the right meats. No, wait a minute, that's an ordinance. That's an ordinance. So evidently we ain't getting rid of all the ordinances. And that's not the only one. There's other ones that we be talking about. We hadn't gotten to yet. There's some other ones that we know that carried over. And we talked about the foods, the meats being abomination. What changed something that was abomination before to make it not abomination anymore? Nothing. So anyway, if nobody have any comments, any questions, anything of that sort, we can go ahead and have a closing prayer. Let's all stand for closing prayer. Father in heaven, again, we come before you again. We ask you, Yah, that you would continue to be with us as we study each of these chapters. We have a few chapters more that's left, and we ask that your word will resonate into all our hearts and minds, that everyone would take time to start studying so we can come together as an assembly and just iron out things in your word and apply it to our lives the way you see fit for us to apply it to our lives. We thank you and we give you all the praise in your son, Yahushua HaMashiach's name we do pray. Amen.
Amen.